for being here. My name is Carly. I am our community events and partnerships lead here at Learn It, and I am thrilled to welcome you to our event on preparing for the next normal, leading for the workforce of the future. It's a pleasure to have with me our panelists today, Stephanie Clerget from Colby, Lindsey Johnson from FitPros, and Shannon Ahrens from Silcoya Consulting. And of course, last but not least, our very own Damon Lemby from Learn It, our CEO at Learn It. I want to thank each of you for being here, and I'm thrilled to have you and to have you leading us in this discussion today, really about the future of work and where a lot of people and our teams and organizations are headed as we move into a more hybrid workforce. And so we've been experiencing a lot of change over the last year and a half, and that change is just continuing. And so I think we just did a poll with our own community around, what's the biggest challenge your team is facing as you kind of look forward into the future of work. And the biggest thing that came up for people was vision and direction from leadership as being one of the biggest challenges. And so I'm thrilled to have the four of you here as leaders in the Bay Area and in California to share with our global audience ways we can all work together and collaborate, and that leaders can really help steer the ship and set their teams up for success. So thank you so much for being here. And before we do get into the discussion, I want to share, just for anyone that's new to Learn It, we are a learning and development organization based out of San Francisco, California. Our team is actually shifted all remote. I'm sure Damon will speak on that a little bit as well. But we help teams large and small and individuals upskill on skills from tech skills to soft skills and leadership for the economy of today and really moving into the economy of 2021 and the future. So we'll speak a little bit more on ways to keep engaging with us at the end of this session. And a couple of housekeeping items. This session will also be recorded. So in case you have to drop off or you want to re-reference this, it will be provided to you in our community offsite after the session, which I'll also share more about. And this session is also meant to be interactive. So if you do have questions, please post them in the chat. We would love to hear from you. We want to hear about things that are top of mind from you as well. And we'll make our way through the questions for our panelists, but we also want to incorporate your feedback, your engagement. So please do feel free to put your questions in the chat. And myself and our lovely community coordinator, Marissa, will be here to capture those. So without further ado, I'm going to just stop sharing my screen. And I want to start with our first question for the lovely Stephanie Clerget. So Stephanie, thank you so much for being here. I want to allow you a little bit of time to speak about Colby and the amazing work that you guys do. But just right off the bat, I think a lot of individuals specifically have taken the last year to reflect on their own growth and how they work and what works best for them, whether that's taking a quick lunch break a little bit earlier in the day or keeping time to exercise or just kind of finding their own rhythm. And as we transition maybe to a hybrid model of coming back to work, that might start to change. So what tools can leaders and can we provide individuals with to encourage self-reflection and strong communication of needs with their manager as we transition?
Well, thanks for that question, Carly. And I'm just so excited to be here and representing Colby Corp. For those that don't know, we're an assessment company, and we really just help individuals to find their strengths so that they can do more of what they care about most. And so in this case, what people care about most is doing a good job and making sure that their families and other priorities that they have are taken care of. And I actually think one of the best tools we have is one that's pretty simple, which is just communication and conversation. And during the pandemic timeframe, I think a lot of people really had an excuse almost to have that connection and that conversation, that connection. We all were, somewhat in the same boat, or at least had some similar things to connect over and talk about. And especially, I think that manager and employee relationship, if managers were really doing their job, they were connecting more than ever before, maybe being a little bit more empathetic than they may have been in the past, and really kind of, seeking out ways to understand employee needs. And now that, we're transitioning to something that looks a little bit different, I think the goal is to find ways to keep those conversations going. And, some people that really comes naturally to them, and others, need a little bit more prompting and that kind of stuff. So one of the things that we recommend is employee surveys and those kinds of things that give you a really high level overview of what individuals might be thinking. But the best thing you can do is have, conversations to talk about what might be going on. And we actually use a framework called 3 Parts of the Mind, which kind of is, what are you thinking, feeling, and doing, in terms of coming, in terms of what it is that you can contribute and what it is that you need. So I always suggest to individuals that they start with what are the contributions that they can make, and then start to transition to, in order for me to make these best contributions at work, then I can, these are some of the things that I need. So, I'm happy to talk about more of what those contributions can look like and what those needs look like. But really, it's about, our best tool is just having conversation and really continuing to connect, even though things might be a little bit different as we enter this new normal.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. And for those that don't know maybe what Colby provides, or kind of how you work with individuals to help them think about the way they work, can you share just a little bit about Colby? I think that would be super, super helpful, just to put that into context.
Sure. So we are, I actually really find it hard to put Colby into a box. So we're an assessment company. We're also a HR consulting company, but we also have a really strong consumer arm. So we get a lot of folks that come to us as individuals as well. And as I mentioned, we're really out to help people to understand their strengths, specifically their instinctive or cognitive strengths, those things that come naturally to you in terms of, when you are making a conscious effort, you're making decisions, you're solving problems, what are those strengths that you have that are natural to you and that don't change? And so we really work with individuals and teams, and much like Learn It, companies large and small, in order to help them to understand those strengths. And we have a assessment that some people might be familiar with, which is the Colby A Index, which gives you insight into those strengths. And then once you know those, you can figure out how do you collaborate with others, as well as what it looks like when you're in a team, and also aligning to your job or your role within an organization.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. And our team actually went through the Colby Assessment, and we had our panelists actually go through it as well, to help us prep for this panel. And so I just want to say the work that Colby is doing has been great. And Damon can also speak to this, that we've used our Colby assessments just even to help us understand how our team works internally, as we've been working remote over the last year. So it's been a really great tool for our team as well. Great. And my next question is for Shannon. Shannon, I know being a consultant, a well-being consultant for Sequoia, you work with a lot of clients on thinking strategically about how they can use health and wellness programs and benefits programs to really enable employees to be their best and to feel supported. And I know you've seen a lot throughout the course of this pandemic, and also as companies start to transition. So how can employers keep remote employees engaged and focused on their well-being, even as some people start to transition to the office? Or, how can employers keep people engaged in that way?
Thanks, Carly, and thanks everyone for joining. I'm super excited to be here. As Carly mentioned, I'm a well-being consultant at Sequoia Consulting Group, and for those of you who aren't familiar, Sequoia is a HR consulting and insurance broker, and we really partner with high-growth tech companies. So a lot of really innovative companies. Many of them are, under 1,500 employees, so they're really focused on their employees. And I help them with really focusing on 4 pillars of well-being. So physical well-being, family well-being, financial well-being, and emotional well-being, and really thinking about creating a strategic approach to supporting their employees. And that has never been more important than in the past year. It was certainly important, but definitely a lot of employers started to think about it even more seriously this past year. So I'd say, to your question, Carly, thinking about how do we keep remote employees engaged and really focused on their well-being, so many employers were really starting to think about that and how can we do that? And I would say, the biggest thing employers can do is just really recognize and make it very apparent that you are aware of these challenges that your employees are facing. And you're sympathetic to them, and you're trying to make sure that you're providing the tools and the resources to help support them and to help them find paths to their well-being. So that little act of simply acknowledging and recognize it can really go a long way in an employee feeling engaged, in feeling connected to their company, and just feeling like their company cares about them. So I'd say that's step one. And then really recognizing that employee well-being is not a one-size-fits-all approach. So really recognizing that for, one employee, like making sure that they can go for that daily walk is how they really meet their well-being needs. But for others, it's really making sure that, financially, they're able to budget and meet their financial goals, and they're feeling supported in that way. So really making sure you're thinking about it in that holistic way. So definitely consider that as you're thinking about keeping those employees engaged. And then really important is making sure that your managers, the ones who are really on the front line, so to speak, of meeting with your employees and interacting with them on a day-to-day basis. So making sure they're equipped with knowing all the resources that your company has to support them in their well-being. Encourage them to start one-on-one meetings, with a check-in, and really listen too, not just like, how are you doing? And then kind of move on to the business of the meeting, but really ask like, how are things going at home? How is your family? What's new? What's something positive? What's something that, you might be struggling with right now? And if things are brought up, you have the resources, the manager has the resources to sort of recommend to that employee. So mentioning an EAP, mentioning, any other resources related to emotional well-being, or, if caregiving is brought up as a challenge, maybe you have a stipend that you provide to the employees. Or, one of the big things that we do when working with our clients is not only just the virtual point solutions that we recommend, but also some of the program and engagement from great organizations like FitPros. And so if there's an upcoming talk, that might be really beneficial to those employees, making sure they're aware of when that's scheduled, how they can register. So those are just, a number of things, but I would say some of the top important things to make sure you're keeping in mind to keep those remote employees engaged.
Thank you so much, Shannon. Yeah, I think it's going to be a topic of discussion, whether you're remote or you're bringing some employees back. So thank you for that as well. And kind of piggybacking on that too, Lindsey Johnson from FitPros. Lindsey's the founder of FitPros, which is a workplace wellness organization that I've had the pleasure of working for 2 years as a yoga instructor for some of her clients. So Lindsey, thank you so much for being here. And I think a lot of the work that you do and FitPros does weaves into employee wellness and some of the things that Shannon was talking about. So I know that prior to COVID, FitPros was primarily an on-site wellness company, and your team quickly took most of those workshops virtual and created a lot of new virtual activities for clients. And so I'm wondering how you recommend utilizing virtual well-being programs in an age where now we're experiencing Zoom fatigue, where people are getting tired of being on camera. So any recommendation for utilizing those programs with fatigue?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, it's inevitable. Zoom, like meetings in general are inevitable, right? Whether they were in person or Zoom, they're going to continue being, even when we do go half of our employees back on site. And so I don't know if a lot of you remember, but in-person meetings are pretty draining as well. But the beauty of in-person meetings is that we could get up out of our seats and we could whiteboard and we could elbow the person next to us and chit chat. And so that broke down that emotional weight. Whereas with Zoom, I don't know about you guys, but I back to back my meetings sometimes, and it's so draining. And so, just 3 quick tips. There's some obvious ones, but like follow an agenda and do not go over time. I say that FitPros has been a remote company since 2016. And so we've had lots of practice at this. And so another cool thing with Zoom is that you can hide your video and not see yourself. And so that helps not distract from the conversation that you're having with someone. And so, and it just takes away that emotional weight of being self-conscious. There's also, you can use speaker view instead of gallery, because when you're using gallery, you're kind of looking at everybody else, which is also, we don't think about it, but it's emotionally challenging for our brain. So there are little things that we could do in a Zoom meeting that takes off the ease from those meetings that are inevitable. Now to your question, how can we still have fun and engage our entire employee population? Well, do fun things. So like at FitPros on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we have a 30-minute team meeting. 5 minutes, we start off the conversation, and Shannon just kind of alluded to something along these lines of like, when you check in with people, like really listen. And so on Mondays, we do, someone on the team picks your favorite color, and we run around our house real quick, we grab a color. And so like if it's yellow, you share something of that yellow thing that's in your house. On Wednesdays, it's question and answer. So super quick, we go around and everybody answers a question. And then on Fridays, it's train the trainer. So it's kind of like a little show and tell teaching thing. So like we always have fun in those everyday meetings. So that's one way to break up the monotony. And then of course, lastly, like, a little plug for FitPros is that have fun, right? So like I said, when we're in person, we were able to get to know people. And so we have to bring that back even virtually. So, getting people laughing, things like trivia, or we do storytelling for families. We do obviously yoga for families. And there's a lot of fun things that you can do to engage not only your family, but also with your teammates. And so having a lot of fun doing those, just a quick anecdote, a great example was we did a cooking class. We did 4 cooking classes for a company who had like an office in New Orleans and Texas, one in England and one in Singapore. And the offices picked a dish that they wanted to share that represented their culture. And so it was super cool because all the employees around the world got to experience having a dish from that other culture. So our chef came up with a menu and everybody cooked together. Like, how fun is that, right? That's not your typical Zoom meeting, fatigue, boring. So just break up the monotony and have a good time with your meetings. So.
Yeah, I love that. I love, I think having more fun virtual meetings and bringing it in interactivity is huge. So thank you, Lindsey. No, I think that's hugely important. And we've even done like escape rooms and things like that at Learn It. But I think also just keeping people moving. And I've never heard of the that you can turn off your own camera. That's super helpful. I'm going to use that because it is kind of an unconscious distractor or an energy sucker. So great, thank you. And also speaking to that, I want to bring in Damon as well. We've brought a lot of our trainings virtual. Our event series being one of those, and we've done all of our trainings virtually for the last year and a half. So Damon, can you share some practical ways to help teams specifically collaborate and upskill?
Sure. Hello, everybody. And Lindsey, Stephanie, and Shannon, thank you so much for joining today. I would like to first start off and thank Carly. Carly has done an amazing job. I haven't had the opportunity in this particular forum, but what you've developed and grown here on our Friday events and offsites has been amazing. So I just really appreciate all you do, and this is great. And it's great to sit here and listen to all these wonderful ideas. And so to get to your question around how to collaborate as a team and upskill, there's already been some great ideas shared. I think since the pandemic started, I think we've done a really good job of getting creative, both for our customers and internally. And for all of those of you who work at Learn It, I'm sure you're shaking your heads. Yes, we love to do a lot of internal trainings ourselves, which has been a lot of fun. So I can share some of the creative ideas and ways that we've done. Obviously we're really proud about how we were able to transition. We've been doing virtual training for, 10, 12 years, but we've been able to transition everything virtually. So we have our workshops and our classes. And some of the other ideas and things we've done is, one of the things during this pandemic, what's been really important is the social interaction with the classes. So it's not only just from the interaction with the instructors, but on the breakout rooms, getting an opportunity to speak to other people and feel engaged for a lot of people who have been, whether isolated at home or not around their friends. Some of the ideas outside of Learn It that I've found to be really successful is, well, first of all, I think going into the new hybrid workforce, I think it's going to be more difficult than the fully remote workforce from everything I've read and seen, because we've working remotely 100%, and now as we start to transition back, there's going to be a lot of skills and upskilling needs to take place, even more so now. And the old school idea of leading, managing people in person is gone, and so we're going to have to get creative and we're going to have to adapt. So there's a lot of opportunities. I was reading this article last night at McKinsey, and 80% of the adults that they interviewed have found value in virtual training, just like they've found value in the increase in doctors' visits virtually. So I don't, of course, I love in-person training, and that's great. But I don't think that virtual training will go away, even in communication. Virtual meetings will go away even when everything is reopened. So some of the creative ideas that we've done is, there's a couple different book clubs out there, like Team Literary, and there's High Tide, and you'll see a lot of these thought leaders out there, which I think is awesome, who are experimenting themselves. So just last month, Learn It joined a book club around a book that I think is fantastic. Think Like a Scientist, awesome book. And you go through and you do your daily nudges. Well, at the end of the session, at the end of the month, you get to do a live Q&A with the instructor. And so we showed up, and I thought that there would be hundreds of people on it. There's like 6 other people. What an opportunity. And in speaking with him, he just said, you know what, I'm trying to find other ways to reach an audience and do so virtually. And I'm seeing that out there. Learn It has our Ask the Expert hours that kind of came from the idea of other thought leaders that we've seen out there. It's a great opportunity. For instance, virtual selling is one of the tools that we've worked on quite a bit, and for a sales team. And there is a gentleman, Anthony Anarano, who has a on-demand library, and then has in-person virtual meetings where you can ask specific classes. So what I've been finding is there's a lot more small group opportunities. And if you go out there and look, everything from virtual selling to how to lead, you can get access to some pretty great thought leaders. And what we've done too is we've assigned different team members to lead these events. So it's not always just myself leading these. We'll have somebody on our team who will lead these and take ownership of it. We did a Colby team training, which was great. And then just yesterday, one of our team members, one of our Microsoft instructors, we did a secondary session on it, a follow-up session. So it helps build the behavior, so it's not a one and done opportunity. So it's, again, we got everybody together for 45 minutes and we just kind of reflected on what we learned and how we can implement the Colby. And so I think that was a great learning experience for everybody. We use different tools like Chorus. So when we go and do sales meetings, our calls are recorded, and then different team members, not just salespeople, but different team members can watch these, and they can provide feedback, not feedback like, hey, great job, more feedback like, I really like that you asked this question, and I really like that you asked this question, have you considered doing something like this? And so that just helps build the collaboration. And it's been a great tool for both our new team that we have, as well as our existing team, and a great way to collaborate on a regular basis. And so, yeah, I mean, there's so many different ways to get creative right now when it comes to learning, and going into this hybrid workforce that we're going into. There's going to be a lot of challenges, and I think that it will be okay as long as we continue to learn. And I think even more important than just learning particular skills, a lot of times is becoming what I like to call, you guys have heard me say this a bunch of times at Learn It, is a learning factory. I think learning to learn is actually more important than being able to pick up a specific skill. Prior to the pandemic, there was all this talk about AI and how AI was shifting the world, and pandemic just put a fast forward button on all of this. And so what's most important these days is to find the best ways for your team to learn and get them in the habit and really love the idea of learning. And that's kind of like what we try to create as a culture at Learn It, as well as for our customers. So it's been, the pandemic's been, terrible, but there's, we've done our best to make the best out of it. And I'm very fortunate for the team we have and the partners that we work with. So again, thank you, Carly, for setting this up today.
Thank you so much, Damon. I feel like we need to make like a little list of all the resources you mentioned too. And I see Stephanie and Lindsey also put some more in the chat too. A lot came up. So thank you for that. Before I go into some more questions, I also want to just open up to the panelists, Stephanie, Lindsey, and Shannon, if there's anything you want to weigh in on just from that you've heard yet. Just I wanted to see if you had any thoughts, and we can pause here before we move into more questions.
One of the things I wanted to touch on is having a community, and that's one of the reasons I love that Learn It has offsite. I've really enjoyed, seeing different posts and learning different things through that community. And so in your company, having some way to have a virtual community, and that can connect both people that are in person and that are virtual, because everybody's got a computer, so they can all kind of jump in that community. One of the things we do is actually every Friday, we have kind of an open lunch, and our fun committee, our health and well-being and fun committee, is responsible for having at least one person there to host it, and everyone just sort of jumps on, and whatever's been going on in the team chat throughout the week, that's what we kind of focus on during that lunch, so that there's a little bit of a topic, but people just come and chat about whatever's on their mind. So it's kind of a nice way to kind of get people together, because that's one of the things that we used to do when we were really using those channels. We have a culture channel, we have a foodies channel, all sorts of different channels. We use Microsoft Teams, but any connection tool that you use is good for that. So I just thought I would pass that along, because it's super fun to see. We have a pets channel. I forgot about that, so people can post their pet stuff, and Geek Bar channel, people post technology stuff. So all kinds of, it sort of hits everybody wherever they are.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Yeah, the community piece has been big, and I think for some people it's a great learning tool. I know for myself, I love that informal learning where you want to learn something right on the spot, and so you can ask a community, or you can ask a team member something on the spot. In addition to these more structured learning programs or benefits programs. So thank you for sharing that as well. I wanted to open it up to a more general question for everyone. And this was something that Shannon and I had actually talked about when we had our last discussion. But over the past year and a half, many of us have designed our lives to work just from home. For example, I know a lot of working moms have moved their childcare closer to home versus closer to the office. And so with some companies transitioning to having an office, and potentially requiring employees to come back at some point this year or moving forward, what can leaders do to ensure that work from office policies kind of account for that work from home life that employees have designed for themselves? So Shannon or Stephanie, if anything comes to mind right away, I'll open it up to you first, but anyone is welcome to contribute.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the reason why we're talking about that, Carly, is, I think I'm in that group. I mean, before this panel started, the rest of the panelists saw my 1-year-old on screen with me because my childcare starts at 8:30. And that actually has been a change since the pandemic. Prior to that, we had childcare starting at more like 7:45 or 8 to allow time for us to commute. And so it's actually been quite nice to have that additional time with the kiddos in the morning. And because, I still start work at the same time, but I don't have to commute. So I think just being really sensitive to the fact that a lot of employees really valued that time, and they got used to it. And it's something that they might either have anxiety about giving up, or if they do give up, it's going to change potentially their mindset about work. It might, they might lose, it might decrease their engagement in some ways. So really just kind of being mindful that you saw it work during the last year. And if people do transition back to the office, that, flexibility is going to be key, and allowing that flexibility to continue is going to be really critical. And then also just, for some employees who weren't either comfortable with childcare for their children, either because different levels of risk, didn't want to have someone to come in the home, weren't comfortable about an offsite daycare center, they've been doing double time. And so for those who now maybe their comfort level is increasing, what supports can you put in place to help them with childcare, with finding a daycare? And there's lots of solutions out there that are really helpful to employees if you are to implement them and offer those up as a benefit.
And Carly, I think if possible, I think leaders should give their team an opportunity to find out what their preference is. I mean, this may not work in all cases, what their preference is. And what we're seeing, and I've actually spoken to several leaders and from different organizations, and what we're seeing is some people are going back to work 1 or 2 days a week. And so it's getting an idea of what the preference should be. And also looking at the jobs and roles, what jobs and roles can be done virtually versus has to be done in person. And one thing that I think is really important that we need to be aware of is that we do our best to stay away from distance bias. And I think people tend to, when you're working together, and people, before I said it, people could be in the exact same role, but have a different preference, as far as whether they want to be in the office or they want to be virtual. But getting back to distance bias, I think that's really something that we need to be aware of, because people tend to gravitate towards people who are closer to them. And if you have team members who are remote and can't, come into the office even, we want to make sure that we have an inclusive workforce and that they're included and their ideas are heard. So those are 2 ideas that I think that people should keep in mind.
Well, and Damon, I love that point. And I think, you have to figure out how, as a leader, how to marry the business need with individual preferences and also needs, because not everything is a preference. Some of it is actually things that people need. And, just being really transparent. So if you're treating the sales team differently than the customer service team because of business needs, just being really transparent about how and why you're doing that, and talking about other things that might also be different, like compensation, because sometimes employees just sort of see the surface level and they say, well, this person has this and that person has that, but they don't really, know some of the backstory behind it. So kind of giving, just being as transparent as you can possibly be. Doing employee engagement surveys, I think, is important. And then also just getting to really get employees to articulate that. I actually have a worksheet that we'll post in the chat, but going back to what I mentioned earlier, that 3 parts of the mind framework. So it starts with, what skills do you need? As you mentioned, Damon, earlier, I think a lot of companies really, advance their technology from everything from, these kind of communication platforms that we're on to other kinds of collaboration platforms to, just everything that we did to kind of move digital in an accelerated way. And so there's a lot of technical training that needs to be done. There's, all sorts of other types of training. We've found some gaps even in our own company in terms of Excel and all of that. So I love that Learn It has so many great learning and programs for that kind of stuff. So, but starts with the employee and the manager having a conversation and really reflecting on what are those skills. So that's kind of the thinking part of the mind. Then the feeling part of the mind is, what hopes and fears do you have in terms of whatever your new normal looks looks like. And this is where strengths really kind of start to come in as well, which is, based on your strengths, everybody deals with risk and uncertainty in a different way. And that's one of the things that the Colby A Index will tell you is, how do you deal with risk and uncertainty? Do you deal with it by figuring out what's going to stay the same and really anchoring and holding on to that? Or do you kind of lean into innovation? So are you going to be the first one to pilot the new return to office procedures? Or are you going to be the one that writes the procedures to make sure that every precaution and eventuality has been taken into account? So knowing the strengths of your employees can really further that conversation, but also just getting them to reflect on the thinking, feeling, and doing parts of their mind, and what can they contribute, and what are some of those needs can be invaluable.
I love that,
Stephanie. A stipend can help with that too. It doesn't have to be, a huge benefit, but having an amount, a sit-stand workstation. Lindsay, I think you mentioned earlier, standing, during meetings, get people a sit-stand workstation, then they can stand. And, I mentioned in the chat, some people literally need, it's not just a preference, they need something to kind of keep them distracted or to keep their body moving, and giving those outlets are great.
I love that stuff. You touched on so many things, like people are holistic. I mean, you can't separate the work and life anymore. I mean, that's completely it. And Jay Pevlin just put a really awesome comment in the chat about how it really comes from corporate belief and practice. Managers and teams can do as much as they possibly can to support each other, but it oftentimes comes from the top down. And I do notice that companies that are, say, 10 years or more older sometimes have a hard time adjusting to allowing people to work from home or flexibility. But I'm pretty sure that my employees really appreciate that. I'll say, if you need to go, get your hair done in the middle of the day, or go get a massage, go do that, go take care of you, because I fully believe with my whole heart that people will be their best self when they feel full. They're going to give more to your company. They're going to just contribute more. They're going to be on top of their game. And so I think we're really seeing that in a lot of the big successful companies right now is how important this flexibility and balance is.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lindsay and Stephanie. I think that's a huge one. Just speaking anecdotally, I love to surf, and I surfed midday the other week, and I felt bad that I was stepping away from the office, and Damon said, "No, surf, like one of your goals this week is to surf 3 times during lunch." So just as an employee and a mid-level manager, for me to know that I had that support from our CEO to take that time for me to paddle out at lunch was such a weight, and also just, I don't know, kind of empowering for me to know that I have that support to take care of myself. So I think that's huge, especially speaking as a mid-level manager. It was huge. So so props to Damon on that one. Another question I had for everyone is just that, and I think we already kind of touched on this a lot, but just with that, there is going to be a need for a lot of communication just over the next year, that we're even talking about hybrid work, but the way and how companies are going back is still, we're all figuring it out, right? So I think, do you have any tools or tips around just how leaders can communicate most effectively with their team in this space of uncertainty? Maybe we can start with Damon. I know you and I had talked about this a little bit, just around communicating often, if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, I mean, when this whole thing started, again, I went and I did a leading through uncertainty on-demand workshop through Michael Hyatt Company, who I'm a huge fan of, and this is where I heard of Colby to begin with. And Michael Hyatt said, communicate often and to be as transparent as possible. And don't be afraid to make mistakes around it, but just get out there and communicate. But communicate in a way that let people know that things may flip-flop, things may change, but I think you just got to find all the different modalities to communicate, and try to find how people on your team want to be communicated with. I think it's important. Some people, I try to make one of my weekly goals is to reach out individually to, I only have 30 employees, so it's not impossible, but just kind of just check in either through text and just see how people are doing, especially as we go through this hybrid, to return to what we're returning to. So I think people need to be agile. They need to, I think Shannon or Stephanie mentioned this earlier, you really listen to their team and be supportive. One thing I've really tried hard to do, and I hope that I get better at this, is not sending emails at all hours of the day. I think that's I've been really trying to be mindful of that, where if something comes up at 7:30 at night and I'm thinking about it, instead of responding, I either send a delayed email. So I just think all leaders should be respectful, because kind of like Lindsey said, there is, work and life is kind of meshed together now, right? So, but that doesn't mean that leaders or employers should just take advantage of somebody 24/7. Otherwise, you're going to create burnout. You're not going to get and I think I read another study that said after 40 hours a week, if somebody's working 50 hours, the productivity only increases like 5%. So bugging people all around the clock is not going to just save that, batch that communication and do it in appropriate hours. Now, I'm not saying that I'm perfect. I'm just saying I'm trying to get better at that. So I think that that's something to keep in mind around communication.
Yeah, for sure. We use Slack for all of our internal communication. We keep everything. We don't text, and we keep everything Slack. And we try to be really respectful of not slacking before a certain time in the morning or after a certain time PST, just to not disturb people. I encourage them to turn off the alerts after certain hours. So. And then we also set up one-on-one meetings with every teammate in HQ, so that I'm talking to every person at a set time every week, just to, typically managers, I think, should set meetings to talk about people's career path and objectives and goals on the big picture. Whereas, my graphic designer might chat with someone in operations to just say hello or talk about projects. And so I think these one-on-one short meetings, anytime, anywhere between like 15 minutes to 30 minutes, just to check in is super important for at least intimate teams. Yeah, that'd be my suggestion.
One thing I'll add to that is, part of my world is about, helping employers increase engagement with the programs or any sort of initiatives that they're putting forth. And I think in this remote world, and I think especially when we go back to hybrid, there's no such thing as over communicating. And so I think any avenue that you can find where you're sending out messages or updates will be great, because you're going to meet people, kind of to Stephanie's point, like people learn and receive information in very different ways. Kind of as a funny story, I was working with a client who was implementing a new vendor, and that vendor was offering at-home mailers to get the word out. And when have we thought about mail in such a long time? And the impact for someone receiving something from their employer at home can actually be pretty impactful these days, when we're so connected to the screen and suddenly you're getting a personal piece of mail. They're going to read it in a different way and consume that information in a different way. So, creativity is going to be key here, and there's no amount of over communicating to make sure you're really getting your message across.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, all of the modalities are there, right? So everything from, written to verbal, people in the chat are talking about text. And I think you really have to have conversations about text, because that can be a little bit more intrusive and a little bit more personal than, especially if it's outside of work hours, but also physical things. So for our holiday party, we weren't getting together because of the pandemic, but we sent out little cards to people with a gift card so that they could use it for takeout or whatever they wanted to do for the restaurant. But they also sent a little light up Christmas lights to everybody. So everybody had the same necklace. So we had a Zoom event and people joined on Zoom, and you could see everybody, wearing their Christmas necklace. So just really getting creative and giving people physical things like Shannon, you were just mentioning, I think is really important. And again, your strengths actually play into what methods of communication, and going that next level deeper, not just how you communicate, but also giving people what they need. Some people need to know the plan, and obviously we don't all know the plan. So one of the things we've done in our organization is said, this is what we're going to do for the next 6 to 8 weeks. And at that point, we're going to evaluate. But then at least people know this is the plan for as long as it's the plan. This is the time frame that we intend, because some people really need that versus others, don't need as much structure. And that can be based on your strengths or based on personal needs. Like in 6 weeks, my kids might be out of school, so my childcare situation might be very different. Or I just get anxiety if I don't have a plan and can't make my own backup plans.
And I'll give a little data behind the in-home, the personal touch component. Last year, I'd say it was May when we actually launched our care package program. So FitPro started curating items to put in care packages, and we home deliver them to employees' homes. That was 30% of our revenue last year. So a program that we just started in May was 30% of our revenue, because employers know that they need to send their employees something to let them know that they still physically care. And companies are saving so much money and not feeding them lunches anymore, and so many of those other perks that they were doing in person, that a home delivered touch, whether it's a gift card or a physical item, is it made a big difference.
That just reminded me of another thing. So we also sent boxes for our conference, which was great. We had a virtual conference, but we sent boxes to our conference attendees, and that was great, not only for them, but also for our brand, because people were posting the boxes and doing box reveals and that kind of stuff. But it also reminded me of recognition, and one of the things that sometimes gets lost, because if you're in the same room together, you're walking back to the desk with the person, and you can say, hey, great job on that presentation. But a lot of times in Zoom, when the meeting's over, you leaves, and for recognition, one of our house of the individual and just stood outside, socially distanced, and actually brought donuts and cider for the kids, and a bottle of champagne for the employee, and kind of recognized that employee for the hard work that they did. So getting creative, I think, is sort of the name of the game, and sharing ideas is really important.
Yeah, that's so neat and thoughtful of that employee to really go above and beyond there for individuals as well. Yeah, this is great. I want to thank each of you too, and I know we've actually had some really great questions come through the chat from this group. I'm thinking we'll pull from those in just a moment, but just kind of as one more open-ended question from me, how do you think we use this opportunity really to transform the work environment more positively? So we've been through a lot this last year, but there's been a silver lining in a lot of cases. So what do you think, just all of you, what do you think is the biggest opportunity to really have this transition be a positive one rather than a drawback for leaders and organizations?
I think I'll just kind of stick with the theme that I've been working off of just embrace flexibility. We've all seen the headlines that, working moms were the biggest group to leave the workforce over the last year due to challenges and struggles with childcare. And so embracing that flexibility will be key to allowing them to re-enter the workforce as we get out of this and return to whether it be hybrid or back to the office. So just continuing with what's been working over the last year, and we don't have to go back to what we were doing before.
I agree with Shannon, embracing change, and I think it's important. I don't think anything is going to go back to what it used to be, and I think we should just blow up those processes or workflows and redo them and find better ways to do it. And I think we've learned a lot over the last 18 months of how to work virtually and everything. And there's been, I love Lindsey's story about pivoting and how they got creative, and 30% of their revenue came from something that they weren't even really doing. And that's, we can do the same thing as far as the hybrid workforce moving forward. So I think it's all about, embracing change, but also coming into it with a growth mindset or an open mind and finding better ways to do it. Technology's got us. Can you imagine what this would have been like if this was 1980? How would we have done any of this work? Who knows what would have happened? But now we're in a position with technology and from learning from each other, and I think we have a really strong opportunity to make work better in the next normal, or whatever it is you want to call it.
I just couldn't help but to throw in there, Damon said we just need to blow it all up, and that totally fits in with his Colby strengths from his profile. So I love it. He's the one who's going to lean into innovation, doing new things, randomizing things, changing the approach. So I love that he is living his strengths. Well, and I think just my last thing to add, I think it's the same, similar to Shannon. It's the same thing we've all been kind of saying is I think it's all about connection and intention. And the only thing I would say about that is intention on the employee's part. I've seen lots of stuff in the chat where people are, maybe disappointed with some of the things that their employers or their leadership have decided to do. And I just really encourage people as much as you can to have open conversations. And maybe it's not just to have, to just say everything you want in one conversation, but sort of think about what are your priorities, what are the things that you really need, and have those conversations. And yes, sometimes people can say no, but then, have some alternatives and just try to make it a discussion and a brainstorm. So that if there's one thing that is a no, there might be something else that's a yes, or at least a tiny little give. Even for myself, one of the things I'm really not looking forward to in going back is my commute. I have a pretty long commute, usually about an hour and 15 minutes each way. And so I negotiated such that I can come in after the traffic in the morning. That means I have to stay later because my workday is starting later, but it's a win-win for me because I can still do the walk, which I had committed to doing every morning and started during the pandemic, during that extra commute time, and I get to miss the traffic. And, it's going to take a little bit of extra stuff on my side with my husband doing dinner and those kinds of things, but it's worth it to me, and it still works for the company. So getting those negotiations and conversations going is really helpful.
Yeah, and Lindsey, thank you so much, Stephanie. Any last thoughts there to add?
I mean, I think that the group said, a lot of great things on that. I think that what I will bring up is Stephanie just brought up, such an amazing point. It's like she learned in the pandemic to take care of herself, that those walks were so important to her. And I think a lot of us did. I think a lot of us, learned how to incorporate things that and found out something about ourselves that was really valuable. And Lars just asked a question in the chat about what impact has physical movement when we interact. And so, I had mentioned that when we were in person meetings, the getting up out of your seat and whiteboarding and stuff, and that creative ability we had when we were in person, we don't have as much anymore. And so physical movement could mean anything from, taking an amazing yoga class with Carly, or just having people get up out of their seats and stretch. And so we do that once in a while. With my team is like, we'll have everybody get up and we'll do like squats in your seat, or, just anything a manager could do with their small team. Like there's so many little things that will just get your blood pumping and get your creative juices moving. And so, I think you can plan a big physical class, whether it's a boot camp or a yoga or whatever that might be, and have it be strategically planned, or just little things just to get people just stretching and moving is just really important. I hope that answered your question, Lars.
Thank you so much, Lindsey and everyone. I also just want to touch on this because I feel like I saw this question come up a lot on in the chat, was just around virtual meetings. I think this plays into movement and stuff as well, but I think it was Elizabeth and then Shiloh also said that one of the great things about being remote or being, is that the amount of meetings have been reduced to just being the most important information. And I think there's some uncertainty or maybe fear around, oh gosh, now am I going to be included in everything again? Is the amount of meetings and is that going to go back up again once we're in person? And so I think for leaders, I think one of the things that I'm excited about and a lot of leaders are excited about is that we get that collaboration back if we're going back into the office. But how do you also account for the fact that some people have actually enjoyed less meetings and more of that individual time to work, and just being conscious about that? Any tips around that?
One of the things we've had to do to be more intentional as people are moving, we're going to be a hybrid organization going forward, is, doing a little bit more time blocking and saying, this is the time that we're going to do collaborations. So people are choosing the day and choosing their collaborators so that they can be in the office on those days. But then on their work from home days, a lot of people are using those more as focus days or specifically for client work. So I think some of that time blocking can really be helpful, and, having it within your department or within the people that you primarily work with, your natural work group. I think that can be really helpful. And then also looking at meeting times. I think one of the things that has really changed is, you might have a longer meeting in person, but with Zoom fatigue, people have shortened their meetings a little bit, and kind of keeping that going. So do we really have to have an hour-long meeting, or can it be 45 minutes? So, it may not reduce the number of meetings, but at least the time.
I think that's great, Stephanie. And I think time blocking is key. One of the approaches we're trying is to look at what needs to be a meeting and what doesn't need to be a meeting. And also breaking down the work to shorter meetings and doing some of the work individually asynchronously, and then coming back together. So instead of having 2 or 3 hour-long meetings, maybe everybody does a little pre-work themselves, and we have a 30-minute meeting. You kind of break it up that way as well.
And do stand-up meetings, because some people cannot stand too long. It's hard to take notes when you stand. So if we have a meeting every morning, it starts at 8:49, and it starts at 8:49 because the intention is that it's over in time for you to make your 9 o'clock meeting. So, and we stand up and do it. So makes it go by a lot faster.
Love it. Thank you. Thanks, Damon and Stephanie. And I see Shiloh's got some great ideas in the chat too. So we are just about to wrap up with time. So I want to thank all of our panelists for your time and sharing your insights today. I know I learned a lot. And so if you enjoyed the panel today, just show our panelists a little bit of love in the chat, or a little bit of a reaction, maybe a little hand clap. Hopefully we all know how to do those in Zoom by now. It took me a while to finally find those, but thank you so much to our panelists. I, again, really enjoyed this, and I'll also be sending out some follow-up information for everyone for how to stay engaged with FitPros, with Sequoia Consulting, and with Colby, and of course, Learn It. So you'll receive that via email as well. And also Stephanie has posted some of the materials from Colby in Offsite, our online community. And so I will also send you the link to Offsite by Learn It. I'll put it in the chat now, but we'll send out more resources on how to stay engaged. And really, I think one thing that I love about these Fridays is that there's just so much great discussion. And so we'd love to see you in Offsite to just keep that discussion and keep this group learning going as we move into the next normal. So thank you so much, everyone. I'll stick around for a little bit if you have any other questions, but thank you to our panelists for your time. So appreciate it.
Thank you, Carly. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Carly. Thanks, everybody.